Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Robert drove for the fourth hour in his comfortable SUV over bumps and rutted roads to an important symposium in a nearby town. The weather was abominable, slushy, cold, and rainy with snow. He looked at the shabby houses along the side of the road, at the lopsided fences, and inexplicable sadness came over him more and more. He had recently had a hearty lunch at a roadside cafe, and he was thirsty. But there was not even a hint of a store nearby, and the tea in the thermos had run out long ago. Suddenly, the same heart-rending song about love, loyalty, betrayal, and separation, which he had loved so much in his youth, was playing on the radio. Unhappy memories came over the man. Robert's childhood could be called very happy, as they say. He was born with a golden spoon in his mouth, because he was the favorite and only son in a family of professors and luminaries of medicine. His father was a leading surgeon and his mother a gynecologist. Naturally, from an early age, the child rotated in medical circles, and he could imagine no other profession. The family was intelligent and very well off. Robert had the most expensive things, phones and tablets. But at the same time, his parents kept their son in austerity, did not allow him to relax and do all sorts of indiscretions. And there was no time for that. I graduated with a gold medal from high school, then from medical school, additional classes and courses. But nobody canceled youth, and one day Robert fell in love. Just like that, right on the street, at first sight. The girl's name was Nancy. She was an orphan, living in a dormitory and studying to be a cook in college. And to get by, she handed out flyers near the subway. A guy was running from the university to his car past the subway, and he saw her. The girl was so touching and delicate, practically without makeup, with cornflower bottomless eyes, in a simple chintz dress with a thin belt. She didn't look like a glib saleswoman who could give away anything by talking her way through her teeth. Nancy timidly held out a flyer and told passersby, "Take it, please. Tomorrow there will be a fair in the mall. Come and see us. We'll be glad to see you." The girl blushed ridiculously and averted her eyes. It was obvious that this part-time job is not to her liking, and she does it out of despair. Robert felt so sorry for the poor girl that he winked at her and said, "Who works like that? Here, look." He took a pile of flyers in his hand and shouted jaunty, "Dear citizens, only tomorrow, a unique opportunity to buy everything for the house at the lowest prices. Only here, come, do not regret it." People began to respond much more actively, and within 15 minutes the two of them had handed out all the flyers. The girl was happy and looked at the boy gratefully. "Thank you. I don't know how to do that, and you've got it so dashing. You must be an actor or connected with the stage." The guy laughed. "You didn't. I'm a future plastic surgeon. I'm studying medicine. I just like to socialize. I'm not afraid of crowds. But you definitely don't need my services. You're already fabulously beautiful. My name is Robert. Let's meet." The girl blushed thickly at these compliments and replied, "And I'm Nancy. I'm a future pastry chef. Nice to meet you." Robert suggested, "I take it you made your plan for today? Then why don't we go get some ice cream or coffee at the cafe? Do you mind? 'Cause I've been working out too much and my head's pounding." They chatted the whole evening without even noticing it. They both felt so good and comfortable together that they didn't want to part. And so their stormy and passionate romance began. Robert did not dote on his Nancy, called her Sunshine, and gave her beautiful bouquets. They walked in the park in the evenings, went to the movies, and kissed furiously in the back row. Both could not imagine life without each other. Things were looking up for the wedding, the more so since there was nothing left before graduation, and Nancy had already begun to work as a cook by profession. But the groom's parents were not at all happy about that prospect. Nancy often visited them. Her father treated her neutrally, but her mother kept trying to get at her, asking tricky and uncomfortable questions, and showing her dissatisfaction with her son's choice. And that's when Robert couldn't stand it. That's what he told his mother. "Mom, I know you must be jealous, but I love Nancy and I want to marry her. If you don't stop harassing her, I'll have to go to her dorm, you know that." "Why? Why do you dislike her so much?" The woman was indignant. "Son, what do you see in her? She's just a simpleton and an orphan. Not too bright to be a cook. What's all this for? When Molly can't take her eyes off you, the daughter of our businessman friends, a very well-to-do family with a good reputation. She's a girl in our circle, you know?" But the stubborn boy didn't want to understand anything and continued to communicate with Nancy in spite of her relatives. He was terribly jealous of her. It seemed to him that everyone in the cafe was only looking at her, and on the street too. The girl took it rather painfully and 100 times explained to her fiancé that she did not need anyone but him. He was her first man, don't you get it? But one day Robert received in the mail that very folder of pictures from an anonymous man. They showed his Nancy kissing and cuddling passionately with some bearded man. A terrible scandal broke out. Robert was shaking the pictures in her face. The girl was crying and didn't understand what was going on, and swore that there was no one else. The couple had a big fight, and Nancy was mortally offended. After all, her conscience was really clear. Robert was indignant and jealous. He thought his fiancée had betrayed him and disgraced him. A couple of weeks went by. The guy had cooled down a bit, was pining and missing Nancy a lot, and just couldn't be without her. He decided to make up and work things out quietly. But when he went to the cafe where his sweetheart worked, he was told that the girl had quit. Robert didn't understand anything how. Why? He tapped her phone, but the number was unavailable. The guy rushed to the hostel, but there was also a complete fiasco. The commandant said that the girl hurriedly moved out, where she did not say. That was it, the bride disappeared without a trace, and no matter how much Robert looked for her, it was all in vain. The boy became very depressed, withdrawn, and didn't go anywhere except work. His mother added fuel to the fire and made the wound even worse. "And I told you, you shouldn't have messed with that orphan good-for-nothing. She probably found another man and ran away with him and forgot all about you. I met Molly yesterday. She promised to come to your house. You should have a look at her. She's a very enviable bride." The next day, Molly did come to Robert's house in the evening. Her parents, as if by chance, had gone to visit old friends, and the young people were left alone in the apartment. The girl acted relaxed, took a bottle of expensive Cinzano out of her bag, and winked at Rob. "Well, hello, Robbie. Are you aware that our parents are more united than ever and have decided to marry us? If anything, I'm not thrilled about it either, you know that. But on the other hand, having a plastic surgeon as a husband is very tempting. Why are you looking at me like that? Bring your glasses, let's drink to the acquaintance." The guy smirked. "Do you think it's possible to get married without love and be happy? I don't believe in such a thing. But I'll drink with pleasure. I feel so rotten in my soul. I can't forget Nancy, if it kills me. I dream all the time. I yearn terribly. I want to drink myself to death and forget everything." They drank, and then some more. And in the morning, they were in the same bed together. Robert jumped up. He couldn't remember anything. Molly was hugging him and sniffling peacefully. He began to poke her and ask her questions. "Molly, wake up. Are you okay here? Did we have something?" The girl laughed. "You're really something, Robbie. What do you think? I'm just lying here naked?" "Of course you were. Don't you remember anything at all? It's a shame, but you said such nice things to me." The guy sat down on the bed and wrapped his arms around his head. "I'm sorry, Molly. I don't know what came over me. The goddamn alcohol. It's a mistake. We shouldn't have. I love Nancy." The girl pouted her plump lips and replied, "No way, buddy. That's not the way to do it. You got me in the sack, and now you're wrong. We're a couple now, and there's no other way. Otherwise, I'll complain to my daddy, and you know what kind of position he's in. It's better not to quarrel with him. You better call me a cab. It's time to go home. And tomorrow night, we're going to an exhibition of a fashionable artist. Dad got me 2 invitations. Stop bawling and crying over your orphan. She's run away and won't remember you. Shake it off at last. Life is only one, and so is youth." So they began to date, and soon, under pressure from his parents, they had a lavish and beautiful wedding. But the trouble was that Robert didn't like Molly one bit. In fact, over the years she began to irritate him, not just annoy him, but just piss him off. Yes, she was impeccably beautiful and well-groomed on the outside, and Robert was a good-looking man, and everyone thought they were the perfect couple. In public, they behaved like husband and wife, holding hands and smiling sweetly at everyone. At home, they just went to their rooms and that was it. They had no common topics of conversation. Molly was only interested in boutiques, fashion shows, and resorts, while Robert was absorbed in his work. There he found an outlet and quickly made a brilliant career. By the age of 35, he had become a well-known and respected MI plastic surgeon. He did everything so masterfully and beautifully that even pop stars and politicians trusted him with their health. The man could keep his mouth shut and never told anyone who and how many times did he make himself out of famous personalities. He was also very much appreciated for that. The years flew by with the whistle. Even his favorite work became boring, and Robert wanted more and more family comfort, love, and children. And that was exactly what he didn't have. He had tried many times to persuade Molly to have a baby, but she didn't even want to hear about it, and she purposely took the pills. She didn't want to ruin her flawless figure and get up at night to a crying baby. She was quite satisfied with the well-fed, secure life of a socialite. Well, the fact that she and her husband are complete strangers and do not like each other, it did not bother her. The main thing is that her husband does not drink, does not go out, and earns enough money for her pleasures. Robert, on the other hand, had been so bored lately that it was a wolf's throw. So now, when he heard the music of his youth, he almost cried. I was thirsty, and suddenly the man noticed a girl in her 20s at the side of the road. She was selling milk and cottage cheese, shifting from foot to foot and wrapping herself in a knitted scarf. And the surgeon suddenly thought, "And I'll buy some homemade milk. I haven't had a drink in ages. At least I'll quench my thirst." He pulled over to the side of the road, got out of the car, and said hello. "Good afternoon. Beautiful. How much milk? Is it fresh? I'm so thirsty. Let me buy a bottle." The girl smiled back and said, "Take it. It's not expensive at all. I just milked it myself today. It's the freshest. Our cow is so good. The milk is so sweet. You'll like it." She handed him a bottle of milk. Robert started to pay, and then he noticed the watch on the girl's hand. He looked closely and almost fainted. It was not just any watch, but the very antique watch that he had given Nancy for her birthday many years ago. The man asked in a frantic voice, "Girl, sweetheart, good girl, can I take a closer look at my watch? Where did you get it?" There should be an inscription on the back that says, "To my Nancy." "May I see it?" The frightened milkmaid held up her hand and looked at him in disbelief. "Don't touch me. Maybe you're a maniac or something crazy? Why do you want my watch? I'm going to scream." The man took a business card out of his wallet and handed it to her. "You misunderstood. I scared you, I'm sorry. My name is Robert. I'm a plastic surgeon on my way to an important symposium. You see, it's not just any watch. I gave one just like it to the girl I love, and then she disappeared without a trace. I still haven't forgotten her. That's why it's so important for me to know if it has an inscription. Because I ordered it in a jewelry shop, there can be no analogies. And where did you get it? Perhaps you or your relatives knew Nancy and can tell me where to look for her." The girl breathed out a sigh of relief and took the watch off her hand, handing it to the man. "Well, if that's the case, then okay. Look, my name is Kate. A little girl gave me this watch as a thank you gift, but it's a long story. I could tell you about it, but you're in a hurry." Robert saw that very inscription on the back, and his eyes immediately moistened. Yes, it was the right watch. He was not mistaken. The man couldn't wait to find out how Kate got it, so he suggested, "I still have time, and the case is very important. I need to know everything. Get in the car, tell me everything in detail, and get warm at the same time. You are very cold, I can see that." Kate didn't need to be begged twice. She was really chilled to the bone, and she didn't mind warming up in the heat. She stretched out her cold feet toward the stove and began the story. I don't even know where to start. It was about 6 months ago, more than 6 months ago, last fall. I came back from my morning milking earlier than usual. walked into the outhouse and couldn't understand a thing. There were crumbs of bread on the table, an almost empty can of canned goods, and a half-eaten pickle. The window was also ajar for ventilation. My mother is a very neat person, and she couldn't have left such a mess behind. While I was pondering this, I heard sneezing and rustling in the room. Honestly, my hair stood on end. Just at that time, a whole wave of burglaries had taken place in our village. I panicked, grabbed a heavy iron scoop, and began to tiptoe into the room. And even my heart went in my heels from fear. What was my surprise when the sleepy head of a little girl about 6 years old emerged from the chest of drawers. She was so funny and scruffy, I laughed with relief, and I was glad it wasn't a thief. The baby rubbed her big eyes and babbled frightenedly, "Woman, don't swear or hit me, okay?" I ate your food, I was very hungry, and I climbed in through the window. I'm an orphan. My name is Wendy. It's cold outside, so I got warm on my things in the dresser and fell asleep. I'll go now. I felt so sorry for the girl, and I responded, "You just stay warm, I'll clean up. My mom will be back soon, and I'm gonna get some peanuts." But no sooner had I cleaned up properly than my mother, Betty, actually walked into the outhouse. She saw the baby, and her hands spluttered. "That's it. What are you doing here, Onion Woe? Kate, did you bring her here?" I told her how it was, and suddenly my mother suggested, "How did you end up at the orphanage? How long have you been there? Why are you running away?" Wendy sniffed her nose and began to tell her story. "Mom died a long time ago. I was very young. I don't even remember her. And they sent me to an orphanage. But I feel very bad there. The elders take away my food. They beat me often. And they lock me in the back room for fun. And I'm afraid of mice and spiders. And I cry there all night long and they laugh. And recently, the older girls decided to run away to the village to steal apples. And I went with them. They didn't catch us. And they ate their fill. And this time I decided to run away on my own. Here in your garden I wanted to climb a tree, but I could not climb that high. I saw an open window, and I could easily get in there. And then I ate your food and fell asleep. You're not too mad at me, are you?" My mother took the baby in her arms, cradled her in her arms. "Why should I scold you? It's not like you went into someone else's house for a good reason. I feel sorry for you, Wendy. You go down the wrong road without supervision, and you're screwed. I'll tell you what, stay with us for a while. Take a break from the orphanage. I can't promise any pickings, but milk and porridge are always fresh, and a clean bed. All right? And then we'll think of something." The girl was very happy and stayed with us. She lived with us for a while. I was so fond of her, like a daughter. She fell right into my heart. Such a good little girl, bright girl. I taught her to read and to count a little bit. She loved fairy tales, especially about Cinderella, and I read them to her every evening. We washed her and bought her some normal things. But still my mother and I were very afraid that they would look for her in the orphanage and find her with us. It's a small settlement. And the shelter, it's not a shakedown office. So the three of us talked it over, and we decided that we'd take Wendy back and I'd apply for her adoption. I can't have children, I'm infertile, the doctors said, a congenital abnormality. My fiancé, Peter, left me because of that. Said he didn't want an empty shell. And here is such a chance that a daughter will appear, and I too will be able to become a mother. I'm so excited. I've already made plans with Wendy, where to put her desk and bed, and I've bought toys. But we were all disappointed. When we took Wendy away and I told the director of the orphanage that I wanted to adopt her, she laughed right in my face. Can you imagine? She said I would never be given the girl because I was single and below average financial status. I was outraged to the point that half the country lives below average, so what? Does that stop anyone from having children and raising them? Would a girl be better off in an orphanage where she was abused than in a loving family? But no matter how much I screamed and begged to be heard, I was brushed aside like an annoying fly. Wendy cried so hard, she didn't want to part with it, so she gave me this watch as a keepsake. She said she got it from her late mother. So I wear it all the time, and I almost cry because I miss my little girl so much. I see her every weekend and hope for a miracle that maybe something will change and I will be able to adopt her. It's my fondest dream." Robert listened very carefully, did not interrupt, and then said, "Thank you, Kate, for taking the time to tell me everything. Give me the address of the shelter. I'll be sure to go there after my business and find out everything. I will try to help you. All the best to you, goodbye. And your milk is really lovely." I already drank half a bottle while we were talking. From that moment on, Robert lost sleep and peace for good. He was counting the minutes until the end of his business trip. He was anxious to go to the orphanage to find out all about the girl, to see her. After all, it was a ghostly, albeit ghostly, thread that could lead to Nancy. Maybe she had given the watch to that woman, the girl's mother. Maybe they were friends, and it would be possible to find the beloved by her last name. More than anything, the man dreamed of meeting Nancy. Oh, how he would have hugged her, kissed her, on his knees, begged her forgiveness for his idiotic jealousy. Closer and closer person than her simply was not in his life. At last, the surgeon returned home, and immediately through his channels and connections, contacted the director of the orphanage and arranged a meeting with her. She turned out to be an elderly, unpleasant lady who was reluctant to answer the man's questions. Wendy Kidd has really been in our orphanage since she was a little girl. Her mother died of a heart attack when she was 1 year old. But I'm not at liberty to divulge information about her. You're not related to her. So I'm sorry. You don't need to see her either. I don't see the point. The girl is problematic. She has already run away from the orphanage many times. And that at 6 years old, nothing good will come out of this brigand. She's no good at all. The man was dumbfounded. Please, why are you talking to me like that? What's the reason I can't see the girl? What's wrong with that? The headmistress was up in arms. There's a lot of them around here, so should I give my kids away to just anyone? You need to know how to approach people. It's you who are asking for a favor. And in general, I am very busy, so do not delay. The door is behind you. Robert left and was simply indignant at the insolence of the manager. She was clearly hinting at a bribe, but he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Wendy's mother's last name was Kidd. That's right, Nancy. She had the same last name. That's why the watch on the little girl was like a keepsake from her mother. He slapped his forehead. What an idiot I am. You could hire a private detective. Maybe he could dig up more information. Why didn't I think of that before? And also talk to an important official, whose wife I recently did a breast for, and ask him to put pressure on the nasty principal, and help Kate with the adoption, and see the girl too. It was said and done, and the man, in order not to waste time, which because of the endless operations was already lacking, signed a contract with a detective agency. And it paid off. A week later, he received a call from there and an appointment was made. Robert was handed a folder with the words, "Here's everything we've learned about Nancy Kidd's life. This is for you. We recommend you check out the address of her neighbor, Kathy, who is said to have been good friends with her. We can go there too, if you like." Robert swallowed frantically and shook his head. "Thank you for your work, and I will go to my neighbor myself. Thank you for everything and goodbye." He remembered perfectly well Nancy's unassuming red-headed girlfriend, Kath, so he dropped everything at once and went to the address. The door was opened by a fat, burly woman in curlers and an apron. In the back of the room, the children were crying, the smell of fried onions. Robert was dumbfounded and did not immediately recognize her as Kath, so he asked her again, just in case. "Hello, are you Kathy? Am I right?" She suddenly laughed. "Robert, don't you recognize me?" "Of course it's me, Kathy. You've put on a little weight since the triplets, I understand. Come on in. What brings you here? You're a big bird, aren't you? I hear you're being touted as a great specialist in women's breasts." The man answered quietly. "Kathy, let's talk about that later. Tell me something, where did Nancy disappear to?" "After we fought, she just disappeared, vanished. I looked everywhere for her, but in vain. It's been years, and I still haven't forgotten her, you know. You remember what a love we had. If you know something about her, tell me, I beg you. You were close friends. I found out recently that she supposedly has a daughter. Is that true?" Kathy instantly became serious and thoughtful and began the story. "You're too late, Robbie. There is no Nancy for 6 years now. That's fate. I don't know what happened between you two back then. Nancy didn't tell me. Except that she quit her job abruptly, moved out of the dorm, and came running in with her suitcase to say goodbye to me for a minute. I was dumbfounded, and I urged her not to be so hot, but she only tearfully said, "I can't help it, Kathy, I'm being intimidated. Don't tell anyone that I came to see you, and tell you what, keep this for now. And maybe I'll pick it up later when everything is sorted out. Actually, it's for Robert. I wanted to give it to him myself, but I didn't dare. I don't know if I should." We kissed and she left. It was afterwards that she called me a couple of times to tell me she had a daughter, Wendy. I was happy for her. She lived in the next town over. I kept wanting to go see her, see how she was doing. But you know, husband and kids, not much of an escape. And then, a year later, they called me and told me that Nancy was gone. I went to the funeral, helped with the money, organized everything, as it should be. Of course, they sent my daughter to the orphanage. I felt so sorry for the little girl. She was crying, tearing up, reaching out her arms, calling for her mother. I wanted to take her away, but my Chuck was furious, said, "Choose between me or someone else's child." So, she loved you very much, Robbie. She had no other man, that's for sure. Yeah, I still have that folder, so take it, especially since it was supposed to be yours. I was going to give it to you, but then I found out you married someone else, and I changed my mind. Why rake up the past? You have a whole new life without Nancy. Robert's hands were shaking. He took the envelope and asked in amazement, "Kathy, but haven't you discovered it in all these years?" She, too, was surprised. "You don't say, Robert. Nancy and I grew up in an orphanage, and they beat your hands off for that. It's not mine, and it's not mine to touch. That's the law. Look at the way the letter was taped up. That's how it is. After Nancy's death, I couldn't throw it away, but I couldn't read it either, so I didn't bother to read it." The man hugged the woman heartily goodbye and thanked her. "Thank you, Kathy, for saving the letter. It means a lot to me. Goodbye, good luck and everything." Already in the car, Robert opened the envelope. There were the same unfortunate photographs they had fought over. When he left, he threw them in his fiancée's face. And the letter. The man began to read it, whispering every word out loud. "Honey, dear Robbie, I was very angry with you at first. I even hated you for your stupid jealousy. And I want you to know that it wasn't my fault. You're the only man in my life. There was no one else, and probably won't be anymore. I was so hoping that everything would settle down and we'd finally make up, as usual, and I'd forgive you. But then a certain Molly and your mother showed up. They began to intimidate me and demanded that I get out of town and out of your life for good. Otherwise, they said, those pictures of me with the montage would seem like nothing more than flowers, and the hired thugs would do the job. I was so scared then because they were obviously not kidding and threatened to throw acid in my face if I didn't calm down. As we were leaving, Molly told me that you were getting married soon and that everything was already decided. And you knew about it and kept quiet, and you were just having fun with me for fun. You can't imagine how hurt and disgusted I feel right now. Why did you all do this to me? Goodbye, my darling, and know that in spite of everything, I still love you. You're Nancy." Robert couldn't contain his emotions. He wasn't just crying, he was sobbing, and he was beating his hands on the steering wheel in a frenzy. He shouted, Damn, I'm such a fool. Why did I believe such nonsense at the time? How could I have hurt and humiliated the girl I loved without really knowing? And Molly? How could she do such a thing? It turns out, and his breakup with his fiancée, and their bed with Molly, all this carefully thought-out scenario, beloved mom, in which I just played the role of puppets. And the experienced puppeteers pulled the strings and applauded when they succeeded. I cannot live one more minute with this monster in the guise of a woman under one roof. I'm going to kick her ass. And the worst part is, there's nothing I can do about it. No more Nancy, she died without forgiveness. Why can't you? And Wendy, I'm pretty sure that's my daughter. Full of anger and determined to finally change his life, Robert entered the mansion. Molly was, as usual, lying in a negligee on the pouf, flipping through a fashionable glossy magazine with a bored look. She caught a glimpse of her husband, then casually threw him a glance. You're a little late today. Another busy day? Emotions overwhelmed Robert. You have no idea how much. And by the way, I'm divorcing you. We have nothing to share, no children. We've been strangers since the beginning, and this marriage is the worst mistake I've ever made. So was breaking up with Nancy, which you had a hand in, as I found out today. How have you been living with yourself all these years? Don't you have a guilty conscience? Why did you threaten my fancy, planting those horrible pictures of her allegedly cheating on me? Why would I do that? If only you loved me, right? But I don't, then why? The woman's grimace of anger distorted, and she threw the magazine aside and jumped up like a scalded woman from the pouf. Ah, that's how you talk? You want a divorce? Please, you've been like a bone in my throat for years. You goddamn righteous bastard. You want to know the truth. Then get it. It's just that your mother asked me to help her get rid of that annoying orphan who's stuck to her beloved son like a leaf and won't let him get away. Not only that, she offered me a lot of money for it. And at the same time, the vacant place of your wife. It was so funny watching your rustic girl weep and run out of town at the drop of a hat. It was easy to pick you up, just to get you drunk. And I had no doubt you wouldn't leave a dishonored girl and marry her. At first, I was even interested. It was like a fun game. Besides, what girl wouldn't want a big wedding? And then I got sick and tired of you. You're boring, and you're nothing in bed. If you must know, I've always cheated on you, so you're a cuckold. Robert said quietly. You're such a bitch. How could I have never noticed this before? Well, of course I didn't. I've been earning money for you to have fun with your lovers, and I'll never forgive you for Nancy. You've ruined both our lives. Do you realize that or don't you? I'm leaving right now. I'll file for divorce myself. I'll send the papers by mail. Robert moved into a rented apartment. It was quiet and modest, and he was even relieved to think that he had nothing more to do with that awful woman. At the clinic, Robert took a leave of absence, for he had not rested in 2 years, and began the task of adopting Wendy. While that was the case, under pressure from the right official, Kate was allowed to file all the paperwork, and she was just waiting for a positive decision to take the girl and become her guardian. The woman was allowed to take the baby for the weekend, and Robert decided to go to visit them and finally see the child for himself. On the way, the surgeon bought a lot of sweets and fruit, and a big baby doll with a toy stroller. The milkmaid's house was large, but not very well maintained, and it felt like it lacked a man's hand. Kate stepped out on the doorstep and was very happy to see her benefactor, for it was with his light hand that she was allowed to adopt Wendy. The girl led her guest into the house, and the table was already set. Everything was simple: soup, steamed cutlets, and baked potatoes. Kate brought the little girl up to him and introduced them. Wendy, this is Uncle Robert. He's a doctor and a very good man. Helped us become related to each other. The little girl smiled trustingly at Robert and stared at him with interest. Kate, meanwhile, was introducing the surgeon to her mother. The woman couldn't walk well, had joint problems, and looked quite ill. She, too, began to thank Robert from the bottom of her heart for helping them adopt Wendy. And the man stood there, nodding his head, but did not hear her because he could not take his eyes off the little girl. It was as if he saw his and Nancy's reflection. There were his gray eyes with long eyelashes and a pointy nose, but chubby lips, and Nancy's 100% smile. Yes, and her hair too, so thick and lush. He had barely come to his senses when Wendy started tugging at his sleeve. Uncle Robert, let's go to lunch. What are you standing there for? Don't be shy. Sit down at the table. Do you want me to show you my drawings later? Kate's mom says I'm really good at it, especially the animals. All three of us ate lunch, talked, and Robert ate with great appetite. Oh, thank you. It's so good. It's been a long time since I've had such a warm meal with good people. What a hostess. Young, beautiful, and even hands of gold. That's lucky for someone. Kate blushed at his compliments and lowered her eyes and answered quietly. Come on, you can say it too. I don't need nobody but Wendy now. She's my light in the window. Right, Bunny? Come to Mommy. Soon we'll be allowed to live together and we'll never be apart from my bead. It wasn't me, she chose me. She didn't climb through our window for nothing. And the woman began to tickle and kiss the little girl, and she twisted and laughed mischievously. Then they all began to sort out the presents they had brought. The girl was happy with the baby doll and cradled and rolled it around the house, playing mother's daughter. And Robert discreetly removed a few strands of hair from her shoulder and put them in a special bag. He was determined and wanted to do an examination. The man didn't say anything to Kate or Wendy yet and decided to wait for the results first. These 3 days seemed like an eternity to him. What he hadn't thought about in that time. What if I made it all up and Wendy isn't my daughter? What if she is? How am I ever going to tell her? How do I explain to a 6-year-old that I'm her real father, alive and well, and she spent all those years in a horrible orphanage? And how do I tell Kate that I'm adopting Wendy, not her? Would I be betraying her? Deceive her? The result finally came, as expected, and it was positive. It said he was 99 9/10% Wendy's father. The surgeon jumped up and down and kissed the coveted paper. Everything inside trembled with the happiness that overwhelmed him. There was the meaning of life. There is someone to live for. He is not alone. His dream had come true. He was a father. Robert was exhausted. He didn't know what to do, who to talk to first, his daughter or Kate. What to say. The situation was very complicated. The girl had almost adopted his own daughter. You don't see that on TV. And it's clear that she fell in love with her, attached to the girl. But what to do? He could not give up on his own daughter and remain a stranger's uncle to her either. After a sleepless night, Robert decided to go to the orphanage and talk to Wendy. When he put the results of the genetic examination in front of the manager, she was stunned. "Listen, you're really something. Why do you keep messing with my head? You're all set for adoption, and now what? This is ridiculous. I'll go get Wendy, and you can talk to her while you're at it." Daddy, after all. The surprised girl and Robert were alone in the game room. The man took in more air, gathered his courage, and began a conversation. "Wendy, my girl, it's hard to believe what I'm about to tell you, but I'm your own daddy. And you're my own daughter. I didn't know it myself until yesterday. Can you believe it? Are you happy? I'm so happy I found you. Now I can adopt you. We'll live together." The girl happily threw herself around his neck and babbled. "Hooray, Daddy, you found me. I'm glad I have one now too. I often thought at the orphanage how sorry I am that my mom is gone, and I don't know my daddy. Only I don't agree with you about living without Mama Kate. I love her. She milks cows and gives me fresh milk. I won't go anywhere without her." Robert's heart ached. He realized how important Kate was to his daughter, how much she had grown attached to her, and to separate them would be to tear them apart. So he pressed his daughter closer to him and whispered, "Whatever you say, my princess, I will make your wish come true, and Kate will be your mother. Honestly, I promise." The little girl hugged him back tightly and squealed joyfully. And the man felt so warm and good in his soul. His heart was filled with the same indescribable love for this little man, whom he would never give away to anyone. He instantly made an important decision for himself, to marry Milkmaid Kate and create a real strong family. The very next day, he showed up at her house with a huge bouquet of scarlet roses and solemnly presented it to the girl. Kate was just stunned because no one had ever given her such a gift. Peter's ex-fiancé could only drunkenly steal a bouquet of daisies from the neighbor's flower bed. She wondered why such a grand gesture, but she invited the guest into the house, began to fuss, brew tea, get currant jam and gingerbread. Robert exhaled and began the first of the most important conversations of his life. "Kate, what I'm about to tell you will probably shock you, but believe me, I only recently learned it all myself. Get ready and listen. I had a genetic test done, and it showed that Wendy is, in fact, my own daughter. Can you imagine such a thing? I cried tears of joy when I found out. I had no hope of being a father, to be honest. Here, read this." The girl stared at him dumbfoundedly, then looked at the document for a long time, and then suddenly sat down on a stool and sobbed bitterly and long. "Why am I so unlucky? Am I cursed or what? Just fell in love with the baby, got used to her, felt like a mother. And now what? It's clear that the baby will be given to you and not to me. I can't stand it. I don't know how I'm going to live without Wendy. I shouldn't have met you when I was in trouble. I wish you hadn't seen that watch at all. At least there was some hope of ever having a child. And now what? Go away, I beg you. I feel so bitter and bad at heart." Robert immediately jumped up, turned the crying girl sharply to him, and looking her straight in the eyes said, "You didn't listen, you fool. And you're already chasing me away. I don't want to hurt you or Wendy because I see how much you love each other. But I can't give up my own daughter, you know. So I've been thinking, and I've decided. Marry me. The two of us will raise and love our little girl, and everyone will be fine." Kate was completely at a loss for words and replied, "Are you making a bad joke right now, or am I dreaming? What about love, feelings? We've known each other a week. We hardly know each other. How can you do that? It's not right." Robert took her hand and answered, "Who needs the damn rules? Tell me. You and I both love Wendy, and that's all that matters. We're getting to know each other. I'll do anything to make you love me, I promise. I'm a famous plastic surgeon. Everyone knows and respects me, so I'm not the worst fiancé in the world. You're also young, pretty, hardworking, smart as can be. So what's stopping us from building a strong family? Why tear our souls apart and divide the child?" Kate suddenly became serious, thoughtful, and answered quietly, "I agree, for Wendy's sake. But promise me you won't pressure me. I, too, will try to be the best wife and mother for the girl. I hope it works out for us, although it is so strange and unexpected. But you live in NY. What about my mom? The farm? The cows? Who am I going to leave it all to?" Robert was relieved and smiled. "No need to leave anyone behind. We'll take my mother with us. I'll buy a house. We'll fix her up. I have connections in hospitals. Everything will be all right. Don't worry. Thank you for believing me and agreeing to this. You won't regret it." When the surgeon went home, Kate hurried to tell her mother everything. She plastered on her shoulder and worried. "Mom, what should I do? I'm an idiot, aren't I, for agreeing to this adventure? I know Robert so little, I still call him you. And now I'm getting married. What if it doesn't work out, and we won't get along? I always thought you had to fall in love before you could get married. And now this." An older woman stroked Kate's head and said, "You know, my daughter, I have lived a long and hard life, raising you alone, without a husband. You remember how hard our life was, and we are still tightening our belts. So you love your Peter, so what? How much good did he do you? I'm not talking about beautiful, sweet speeches now, but about real men's actions. That's just it. As soon as he found out you were barren, he left you, stepped over you, spat on you, and didn't look back. Now, look here. Robert is a serious man, a doctor. He knew right away that you can't have children. Didn't you tell him yourself when you first met him? The man does not propose you to go to bed with him, but to create a family, to raise a child together. This is worth a lot, believe me. Don't hesitate. I've seen a lot of different people, and I can tell you, he's a good, kind man. It shows. And love, baby, it's in deeds. In caring, it will come with time, you'll see. It may not be easy at first. You have to give in to each other, learn to live for each other. But when you realize that you will not find a better husband, your soul will be filled with light, and you will be absolutely happy." Kate calmed down and said, "Thank you, Mommy, for the advice. You wouldn't wish anything bad on me. After all, this is such a chance to change my life and fulfill my long-standing and almost unfulfilled dream of becoming a mommy and wife. It's a sin not to take it." Since then, Robert's life has changed dramatically. He withdrew almost all his savings from the bank and bought a spacious country house. He had a separate room for everyone. Wendy had a nursery and even a small playground, because his little girl was a terrible fidget. She wouldn't sit still for a minute, so she had somewhere to put her energy. There was a pine forest around, wonderful nature. The place was quiet and peaceful. He didn't want to plunge Kate into the frenzied NI rhythm of life right away. After all, she was a country girl, and she was used to a measured routine. A month later, the couple modestly signed in the registry office and officially adopted Wendy. Everyone moved to live in the mansion. Kate turned out to be a great hostess. She literally had everything on fire in her hands. She was a wonderful cook and spoiled her family with all kinds of goodies. Day by day, their relationship grew closer and warmer. Taking care of her daughter helped a lot. Robert, as he had promised, did not press Kate. He waited patiently for her to want intimacy herself, to really love him. And he had no idea that Kate secretly just wanted Robert to be persistent and take the first step toward intimacy. Kate's mother, Betty, was treated at a specialized clinic, and she got much better. Now the woman could walk quite briskly by herself, leaning only on a cane. She couldn't be happy about such a wonderful son-in-law. She praised Robert in every way, and he walked proud and happy. But Betty saw and understood, and one day she couldn't stand it and decided to talk directly to her daughter while my son-in-law was at work and Wendy was running around in the yard. "Kate, tell me honestly, don't you like Robert at all? You still can't like him as a man, can you?" The daughter answered in surprise, "No, not at all. On the contrary, I just now realized how right you were. I see how much he cares for all of us, protects us, loves us. So I'm very lucky to have a husband." The older woman frowned. "Then answer me one question. How long are you going to mock him and keep him away from you? I can see and notice everything. Robert looks at you with such eyes. He just eats you with his gaze. A man's patience is not rubber. You could lose your husband." Kate blushed. The conversation was very frank and answered quietly, "I don't mind it at all. On the contrary, I want it a lot myself. But I guess it's all my own fault. I told him at the time not to put pressure on me, so he's putting up with it. And I'm also shy and can't make the first move. What am I supposed to do? Go to him at night and say, 'Let's sleep together'? I can't do that." Betty only shook her head. "Oh, what children you are, even though you're all grown up. You torture each other, and you do not know why. So my daughter, my beloved son-in-law got me a burning ticket to a sanatorium, where they treat joints, they say, and really do wonders. Mud, all sorts of procedures. I'm taking Wendy with me. We'll take her for a couple of weeks and go for a walk. There's a swimming pool there. And you do not lose time, whatever you want, but to get on with her husband and family life. That's my advice. You will have a honeymoon." Betty and her granddaughter went on vacation, and Robert drove them to the train station and personally put them on the train, making sure everything in the compartment was top-notch. On the way home, he bought a huge basket of flowers and champagne and fresh, fragrant strawberries. He wanted very much to please his Kate and to make a romantic evening. But when he entered the house, he was stunned. The lights were dimmed, scented candles were quietly crackling, and Kate was nowhere to be seen. He went quietly into his bedroom to change into his home clothes, and he was stunned. On the bed, curled up, his wife was sleeping. She was dressed in a gorgeous bright red dress with an impressive neckline. Her hair scattered on the pillow in beautiful curls. She was just beautiful. The man sat down next to her and admired her, then began to gently stroke her hair. It was nice and smooth to the touch, like silk. He snuggled up to her, inhaling the light scent of floral perfume and tenderness. Kate was aroused by the caress, a little embarrassed, and babbled, "Robbie, are you home already?" "Oh, I thought I'd surprise you. I lit the candles. I got all dressed up. I thought you'd come in and be surprised. It was silly, wasn't it? And then I lay down and fell asleep." Robert said quietly, "What a beautiful, gentle girl you are. May I kiss you?" Kate reached for him, and they kissed passionately. That night they stayed up until dawn. Robert couldn't believe his happiness. He kissed his beloved's hands and every inch of her body. They cuddled, ate sweet strawberries, drank champagne, and loved each other again. As he fell asleep in the morning, Robert whispered, hugging his wife tightly, "God, what fools we are. So much time wasted. I won't let you out of my arms now, you know that." Kate smiled, pressed herself even closer to her lover, and fell asleep blissfully. She felt so free and easy. She had never felt so good with anyone. The honeymoon was a success, and the grandmother and granddaughter, who arrived from their vacation, noticed the changes in the house right away. Kate was radiant and fluttering, with sparks of joy and absolute happiness in her eyes. and Robert looked very happy, and he was transformed. Betty thought to herself in relief, "At last, the children are all right. God has heard my prayers." The parents were cuddling and hugging their daughter, and she was telling them vividly what she and her grandmother had been doing on vacation. Wendy had changed a great deal since she had found parents and a real family. She was no longer the hunted orphan girl who had been forced by hunger to steal. She was now a confident, bright girl going to first grade, socializing with everyone, chattering away, and no different from any other home child. Robert decided to do his duty and find Nancy's grave. He owed it to himself to apologize, to ask her forgiveness for everything, even if it was too late. And so he did. He wandered for a long time through the cemetery in the neighboring town and barely found the abandoned grave with a half-rotted wooden cross and a barely visible inscription with the name and date of birth of the deceased. The man put it in perfect order and ordered and erected a beautiful monument. Next to it, he planted the red poppies the bride loved them so much. Then he sat down on the bench and whispered, "That's better. Now we can bring Wendy here too. Forgive me, Nancy, for being such a bastard, for betraying you and humiliating you for nothing. I ended up ruining your life and mine. You know, my good man, all these years I kept the memory of our love in my heart. And now I've met Kate. You are not angry, are you? She is very good, gentle, loves our daughter, and in some ways reminds me very much of you. Our daughter is so grown up now, she's in first grade. She's an unbelievable fidget, already managed to fight with a boy. Sleep well and know that I will always love and protect our little girl and will not let anyone hurt her." One day, Robert decided to treat the family and order sushi. Betty wondered how he could eat with chopsticks and what kind of gimmick it was. Everyone enjoyed the meal, but during the night Kate got sick. She vomited until the morning and felt disgusting. A frightened Robert thought she had poisoning after the exotic food and took her to the infectious disease department for examination. It was strange, though, because everyone had eaten, but only Kate was poisoned. The surgeon waited an hour while his good acquaintance and best infectious disease doctor examined his wife. Finally, both came out. Kate looked very frightened and was crying. She was as pale as chalk. She was shivering. Robert shouted impatiently, almost shouting on his nerves. "What is it? John, don't keep me waiting, do you? Is it serious? I thought it was poisoning. And they recommended this restaurant to me as a very good one. Damn that sushi. I don't want my wife to suffer because of it." The doctor gestured to stop the tirade and replied, "Come on. It has nothing to do with the restaurant, and you've come to the wrong place. The gynecology is upstairs. Your wife is sick because she's pregnant. She has a seafood intolerance, so her body reacted that way. That's all. I prescribed her a good sorbent. Take it for a couple of days, she'll be fine. But don't wait too long to get on the registry." Robert could not believe the doctor's words and stared dumbfounded at the weeping Kate. "God, I'm so happy. Why are you crying, sweetheart? Or are you too sick? Would you like some water? Or some tea?" The woman sobbed, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "I don't believe it. I was told many times in the district center that I was infertile. Some kind of congenital anomaly, they said. And now this. Are you sure you're not mistaken, doctor?" He just smiled. "You can go to the gynecologist for an ultrasound and double check. But according to the tests, you are pregnant. Congratulations. Wrong, apparently colleagues with a diagnosis. It happens." Kate could not believe it, so she went to the ultrasound, and only when the specialist showed her a little spot on the monitor that looked like a poppy seed and said that it was the future baby did the woman realize that a miracle had happened. And she would soon give birth to a baby herself. She was overwhelmed with a sea of emotions, incredible happiness, elation, and anxiety, wondering if everything was normal there. Betty, upon hearing such stunning news, Robert almost started kissing my hands. Son-in-law. Well done, son-in-law. Kate has long despaired and resigned herself to the fact that she will never be a mother, and you still managed to make her a child. Tomorrow I will go to church, light a candle, thank God, because children are a gift from God. Robert didn't hide anything from his daughter, though he was a little wary of her reaction. So he said, as straightforward as ever, "Wendy, soon you will have a brother or sister. Are you excited? You'll have someone to run around the yard with and play spinning when the baby gets older. Don't worry and don't get any ideas. Your mom and I will love you just as much as we do now, even more." To their surprise, the little girl took the news easily and calmly. She immediately began to babble. "Wow, that's awesome. Mom, will you let me carry the baby in my arms? And ride it in the stroller? Isn't that just like a mother's daughter? Like my baby, but alive, right?" Kate laughed, hugging the little girl. "Of course, my little bead. We will be together and roll and bathe and swaddle and not sleep at night. It will not be boring for sure, but we can do it because we are a team." Betty invited everyone to dinner, and then they watched a children's comedy about Santa Claus and laughed heartily. Wendy was lying in the middle between Mommy and Daddy, and she felt so good and warm and cozy, being guarded on both sides by two loving hearts. And Betty was knitting a fancy long scarf for her granddaughter in the armchair and admiring the family, genuinely happy for her Kate, who is so lucky to finally have a life. Robert hugged his favorite girls, and his soul was filled with absolute happiness. At last, too, he had realized himself as a husband, a homeowner, and a loving father. After all, without these three ingredients, it is unlikely that a man would be happy. And only Molly, Robert's ex-wife, bitterly regretted, years later, that she had so foolishly missed her happiness. She was not getting any younger, lovers were replacing one another. But it was all a momentary pleasure, and she now wanted a man like Robert, stable, faithful, and decent. She could have had children by now, but God would not let her. All the parties and fashion shows had become tiresome, and the resorts had grown tiresome as well. So the woman, to drown out loneliness and oppressive melancholy, more and more often began to drink. First, a couple of glasses of wine, then champagne, and then went to the whiskey. She became especially bitter when she accidentally saw an article in a popular women's magazine about a famous plastic surgeon, Robert. It said what a talented and good man he was and had a picture of his whole family. Robert was sitting on a soft couch, and he was gently hugging a young, pretty woman. Sitting next to them was a girl of about 7, who looked a lot like him, and in his arms was a very young infant. There was a caption underneath the photo: "Happy husband and father of a large family with his wife Kate and his daughters." Molly looked at the familiar faces and saw that Robbie is absolutely happy without her. He was shining. In his eyes, he could read pride in his wife and children. The woman got angry, tore out the page, and tore it to shreds. She took a sip of scalding strong cognac and whispered, "And it could have been me in that young girl's shoes. If I hadn't been so stupid and taken those damn birth control pills and had at least a little respect for Robert. I thought he was a boring bore back then. And now? What was I left with? An aging socialite, 100 years old. No one really wants me. There's a lot of money, but there was no happiness.